Hey there, career seekers. Welcome to Find Your Passion Career. I'm here to help you find a career you like, and dare I say, possibly even love. I'm your host, Amanda Nachman. I'm the founder and CEO of College Magazine. After working with thousands of college students, I've noticed that when it comes to career, there's a lot to demystify. Let's get started. This episode is brought to you by Meetup. At Meetup, great things happen when people come together. By starting a group on Meetup, you can expand your network and learn new skills. Start with your interest, whether it's design, technology, climate action, or anything else, and Meetup will automatically promote your group to the people who share your passions. Create a Meetup group today using a .edu email and get a free 6-month subscription. Head to meetup.com to get started. Hi, everyone. Today I have with me Jason Lauritsen. He is transforming management. As a keynote speaker, trainer, and author, he liberates managers from outdated and inhumane practices to cultivate human potential at work and improve people's lives. His experience ranges from startup CEO to Fortune 1000 executive. He also spent several years leading the Best Places to Work program for an HR technology company, where he gained deep insight into some of the best workplaces in the world. Jason is the author of 2 books, Unlocking High Performance, How to Use Performance Management to Engage and Empower Employees to Reach Their Full Potential, and Social Gravity, Harnessing the Natural Laws of Relationships. Welcome to the podcast, Jason.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I need to know, what are the best workplaces in the world?
They're all over the place. The thing is, and I think a lot of them, ironically, or maybe not ironically, are small, sometimes small ones. Sometimes they're in very strange businesses that you've never heard of. It was a fun few years that I had the opportunity to lead that Best Places to Work team, because some of these really exceptional workplaces that kind of blow your mind when you see them and you're like, wow, so that is possible, are in very unexpected places. So it was a fun thing to do.
Not just the Googles and the Facebooks of this world.
Not just Google and Facebook. Nope.
I'm a big proponent of encouraging job seekers to look outside of these 1% brands, because there are amazing places to work that aren't, the Fortune 100, Fortune 500.
They are all over the place. And the reality is we participate in shaping that often too. And, the cynical side of me is always too, you have to remember that the big fancy brands also have the most people and money to put into polishing up a story to convince you they're the best places to work, when in reality, they're not always the best places to work. So it depends. You got to be very clear on what you're looking for and why. But yeah, there are great workplaces in every community if you know how to find them and know what you're looking for.
Oh, that's such a great point. And, I had a friend that worked at Google years ago, back when we graduated college, and he was like, it's amazing. They feed us, we have games. But he's like, I never leave work. I basically, I'm making great money, but I have nothing to spend it on, because all I'm doing is working.
That's right.
And I'm sure that's not the experience for everyone, but that's just one take on one of the best places to work, right?
Well, and one person's amazing place to work is another person's nightmare sometimes. I mean, I never forget a friend of mine who, her lifetime dream was to go work at this particular organization. Her whole career, she had wanted to work at this organization. From the outside looking in, she thought it was exactly what she wanted, and she got her dream. She got a job there. She went to work there, and it was horrible for her. She hated it, and then she left and actually found her way to a job that actually is her dream job, that wasn't at all what she thought it was going to be. And so sometimes we don't know, right? We get caught up in the hype sometimes and miss the things that really matter.
Yeah. Okay. Well, tell me, how did you imagine your career journey when you were in college? Because you started from a biology major and then into recruiting, then professional speaking, launching your academy. Can you talk a little bit about how your vision changed over time?
My career aspirations when I was in college, coming out of college, the only thing I cared about, my primary vision was to make $100,000 a year by the time I was 25 years old. That was it. The means of delivery didn't really matter. I just knew that that's what I wanted to do.
Where
And
does
so
that come from? Where did that
I
come
have
from?
no idea. I have no idea. I think, where does that come from? I think part of it was like when I was in college, ironically, like when I was searching for, during college, like in the summers, I would apply for, I was in science. So I'd apply for these research internships, and I got a couple of them over different summers. The second one I got was a pretty prestigious one. And the postdoctoral student that was running the lab I was in turns out to also, he and his wife were Amway distributors. And so he recruited me into being an Amway guy, which made sense to me because at the time I think entrepreneurship was in my DNA, but my parents were not entrepreneurs. My mom's a school teacher. That's sort of as far away from being an entrepreneur as you can, like very risk avoidant. They sell you this dream. And so I bought into the dream of it. I bought into the agency of it. I bought into it, to the potential of it. I love the potential. And their motivational machine was awesome. Like the funny thing is you sign up and then you can sign up for a weekly tape series. They'd send cassette tapes. This is how long ago it is, cassette tapes. And every week you'd get a cassette tape. And then once a month you got a motivational book. And then they had regional conferences and they had national conferences. And I mean, they kept you like pumped full of sunshine and motivation and vision. And it was awesome. That part of it was amazing. And then I realized at some point, if I work this hard at anything, I can become rich. Like this is a terrible business. I was like, this is not a good business, but if I apply this kind of effort to anything in my life, I'm probably going to do okay. And so that I think that was part of the narrative for me. I found that was in college that happened. And so I think that set me off on, like, I was very focused on achievement. I was very in achievement at that point in my life was financially motivated. My parents weren't, I grew up in a, say, I don't know even know how to describe it. Like I never remember us not having money, but I also remember moments where my mom would be like, I got paid today, so we're going out for pizza. I feel rich today until it's all gone tomorrow. And so, like money was a big top of mind thing. And so that was it. So I chased it. Thankfully that landed me. The reason that I got my recruiting job, it was a headhunting job, third party headhunter job. The average first year associate makes 97,640 some odd dollars. And I'm like, there it is. I'm like, I can do that. I can stick around or whatever it was. And then they had a whole narrative. If you make it through 3 years, the average was 200 and some odd $1,000. And I'm like, easy. I can stick out anything. Like that's what I'm good at. I can just power through. And so anyway, so that's how thankfully I got into recruiting, because recruiting then is when I found my passion, and I realized that workplaces are really, really broken. And I was in a broken work experience. I'm looking into broken work experiences all day. And it was sort of in the middle of that I sort of started the seeds of devoting my life to trying to fix work changed. And then over the next 10 to 15 years, I mean, I still was motivated certainly by achievement and money and all of that, but I got a lot clearer about purpose and impact. And that's really what started to drive me. And I put a plan. I kind of had a 10 to 15 year plan of where I was going to end up, and started making decisions to move me towards that. And so it evolved a lot. And then I hit 40 and it pivoted again a little bit. So it's been evolving. It's been evolving and changing for 20 years.
I love that too, that, the financial aspect of it only took you so far. It was defining your passion, is what has driven you in this new chapter, and has taken you to another level. As you can tell from, that intro that I've given you and what you've accomplished since. I love that what drove you was that workplaces were broken. And I think a lot of listeners could probably attest to having worked in a broken workplace. What stood out to you as, what were the elements of a broken workplace?
when you're a third party recruiter, right? So you're outside the client. You don't work for the client company who's trying to hire the person, and you don't work for the candidates necessarily who are you're trying to match up. You're a matchmaker. And so everybody's generally fairly honest with you because they pay you a lot of money to try to make this match. And so if they lie to you, all they're going to get is a bad match. And so you have the company kind of, and as a recruiter, you ask questions about, well, why did the last person leave? And they'll give you a bunch of different stuff, and you keep asking questions, and as you poke around a little more, you start to learn about all the dysfunctions and why the job's not the greatest job in the world, and then you learn what to sell as the upside or whatever. But then you try to figure out that, and then people on the other side that you're talking to that are recruiter or the candidates for the position, they're telling you kind of honestly too, like what they've hated about their past jobs and what their past terrible managers did. And so there was so many things that, I mean, I think there was a lot of misalignment between, we're not great at putting people in the right jobs, honestly. I think a lot of people, honestly, so workplaces, and that starts early on. We have a lot of people coming into the workplace that got started down the wrong path a long time ago. And then they get to the workplace and they're headed on the wrong path, and then the company puts them in the wrong place, and then they're putting managers in spots that aren't trained, and so there's really poor treatment and poor communication and poor dynamics. And so, I mean, it's a cascading effect of things that were broken. But I think at the most fundamental level, it is just that the organization forgot that these people that show up every day to do work are actual human beings, and they have needs and they have feelings and they need to be cared for. And when you treat them poorly, they don't feel good and they don't do good work. And then it also spills over on their families and everything else. So I think that's the fundamental, what I ultimately realized. I can tell you that now succinctly, but at the time it was just like, what isn't broken? Like where isn't there dysfunction?
Yeah, you talk a lot about compassionate leadership. Why is it important that leaders are compassionate? How do you inspire a new generation of compassionate leaders?
Compassion, I came to compassion or understanding the importance of compassion as, I guess calling it that specifically over the last 12 to 18 months through this whole pandemic experience. And it was because suddenly, the organizations, we all started talking about how our employees are struggling. And then organizations started talking about, well, we need to make our people more resilient, and we want to do resiliency training, and we want to do all this. And I'm like, wait a minute. I mean, resiliency, like teaching employees resilience in the midst of a compassion is like teaching somebody to take a punch in the middle of a fight. You're like, just lean into it, or just, try not, like that's not what we need. What they need is the fight to stop. They need somebody to be standing there and go, that person's getting their butt kicked. They probably need help. I should try to stop this fight. And that's what compassion is in action from a manager. And I know that's not that's not the definition of compassion you find in the dictionary, but what compassion is in action is, if you go look at sort of how psychology defines compassion is about sort of noticing suffering in others, being moved by that suffering, sort of being, feeling like, oh, I see this person is suffering and that matters to me. Wanting the person to be out of suffering, and then taking action, or sort of being willing to take action. And that like, what else do you need in a man? I mean, that's what we need in management. If managers did nothing but this, like, I'm going to scan my team and I'm going to do whatever I need to do to stay in touch with them so that I can pick up when they're struggling. And because when they're struggling, I don't want them to be struggling. I want them to be thriving. I want them to be happy. I want them to be well. I want them to be successful. And whenever I see that they're struggling, I'm going to figure out what's happening and I'm going to help. If managers did nothing but that, you would see transformed workplaces and you'd see performance explode. And so it's such a simple thing. And as far as how do you inspire it, I honestly, I honestly don't know. I think in some cases it's about inspiring new, more compassionate leaders, but I think more often what I'm discovering is it's about giving managers permission to care. I think we've had this model of work and model of management that's all about, just it's about control, it's about getting the work done, it's about delivery, it's about, that we have all these misguided notions about what we have to do as managers to get people to perform. And managers have frankly been told, like, you should not get wrapped up in people's drama, you should not become friends with the people you manage, because chances are we're going to ask you to do a bunch of terrible things to those people through the course of your management career. And so don't get too close to them. It'll make it easier to just throw them off the heap when you need to. We might have to cut people someday. Don't get attached. And it's like, what kind of world do we live in of work when that's the case? And so a lot of times it's just saying it's okay. It's okay to care, and it's okay to want to help, and it's okay to get in if people invite you into their lives and they're willing to accept your support as a manager, then it's okay. I don't care what HR says.
I remember
It's
hearing
okay.
Ken Blanchard say, it's like, you invest in these people by hiring them. You believe in them. You invested in their training. And so instead of thinking like, okay, this is not working out, like first thought is like fire. How can you be compassionate about, this person, maybe help them reinvent their role at that place or help them navigate a difficult situation? And that comes down to a compassionate leader.
It does. And it's also remembering that work is, and I can, at the heart of my work and what I teach around management and employee engagement and culture is that employees experience work as a relationship. That is, it's a relational thing. If you think about like what gets us most motivated, it's when we feel cared for and accepted and seen and heard and appreciated and communicated with. That's a relationship. And so in relationship, if you think about what we just talked about, this approach, like imagine, I always kind of play it out, like imagine being in that relationship, in a romantic relationship with someone where they're like, like on the surface, I'm willing to commit to you for now. I'm willing to commit to you in this relationship, but I'm not going to get overly invested because things might change and it'll make it easier for me to kick you to the curb if I don't get too attached to you. So can we just keep this really casual and I'm going to stay pretty distant from you? Like, how's that going to go? Like, and I know there are a lot of people in relationships like that they should get out of those immediately, but not what you should aspire to at work or in your personal life or any place else. And so we're just at a time where I think it's becoming, and the one thing that gives me great hope is the younger generation, Gen Z, the younger generation. I think we don't have to teach them to be compassionate. Compassion gets beat out of you by the system. They're already compassion is a natural. Kids are compassionate. Every child I've ever been around, we're naturally compassionate as human beings. We teach it gets beaten out of us as we come through the ranks, we get farther along. And so our next generation is my greatest hope. I'm excited because I don't think they have to be taught this. They just have to be given permission to lead in the way that's natural for them.
Yeah. Well, for any listener that's out there thinking that, they see a future for themselves in leadership or a management position, something that you talk about is how leaders can get in the way of their teams performing. So what's something that they can do to make sure they're not getting in the way?
I'd say two quick things. One is really invest in creating clarity for your people, meaning, around goals and expectations. The golden rule of management that I teach and I write about in my book is if it matters, write it down. If it's not written down, it's not clear, period, end of discussion. And so write it down. If you don't have it written down, then that's a signal that it's not that important. It'll likely create chaos and drama for you down the road. So get clear on everything, write it down, behavioral expectations, goals, everything. The second piece is if you're leading a team, just be constantly checking in and asking them for feedback. What's working, what's not working, how can I be a better manager for you? And every one-on-one I used to do with my team, I would always say, what can I do to be more supportive, or how can I be a better manager for you? And that was invaluable. And that gives you that check-in constantly. So they'll let you know when things aren't going well.
Yeah. On the topic of being a leader, I think there are people out there that maybe think, I don't know if I'm qualified to be a leader. I don't know if that's something that I could ever aim for. I talk a lot about the topic of being qualified. What does it actually mean? And I'd love to get your opinion on what does qualified mean to you?
It depends on which side of the equation you're coming at this from. So as an individual, qualified it really comes down to, I think, do I feel like I have the capability? Do I feel like I have the wherewithal? Do I feel like I have the gumption, the grit, whatever, to do this thing, or to figure it out? So I think there's an element of qualified that shows up there when I think, it depends on what I'm talking about. But I also think that there is an element of, like, I can think that I'm qualified to, drive a race car, but I just am not. I could be someday, maybe. I might have the capabilities or potential to do that, or to be an astronaut or whatever, or to be I really wanted to be a rock star, but I just frankly don't have the innate musical capability. So but I am. My quarantine project was to learn finally how to play blues harmonica. So I am working on that. I will never be a rock star, but I might be able to jam on a blues harmonica in a rock band someday. It's a tough one for me because I think qualified is really complicated, because I think people should take moonshots. And I think so much of this too gets wrapped up in gender. There's so many things, or gender, or race, and how you grew up and what messages you've been sent as an insanely privileged giant. Like, I am really tall. We're sitting down, so we're the same size today, but I am 6'5". I am
Do you hear
tall.
that, everyone who's on the shorter side of things? Hey, virtual's working out for you, right?
It
Nobody
is
knows the height. And we know that there's a height bias because it's like, aren't all the top, like
they're all
1%
tall.
of the CEOs, they're super tall, right?
So like, I was born to be a CEO. I have all the characteristics. I scored really well on tests. I do good. I could do all the things. And so I have all this amazing. The only limitation I remember in my entire life was that I remember when I was young, when I was little, I was born with a lazy eye. And so I had surgery when I was like 18 months old. They had to sever a nerve in my eye or whatever. Anyway, my eyes don't work together the way everybody else's eyes work together, which meant that my career as a commercial pilot was over when I was 18 months old. My potential there. And so, like, I say this very honest, like, that's the only limitation that I distinctly remember in my life. And so I have trouble answering this question, because I know that from all of my female friends that I am really close with over the years, like, the struggle with what qualified means to them and what it has meant to me, like, is totally, like, just the way that we see and think about the world. So I have trouble. So that's a really long way of saying, like, I have trouble answering this because of my own experience. Because while I'm empathetic and I try to understand the other side of this, I think you are always infinitely more capable, and you have more potential inside of you than you will ever give self credit for. And so that's why it's important to have people around you who see it. And like, one of my superpowers I've learned over the years is giving other people, is extending permission to people to be things that they already are and just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
They don't need my permission.
Sometimes it's easier for other people to see it than for you to see it yourself. Have you ever felt unqualified or faced career rejection?
Oh yeah. I mean, I have made I'm a master of failure, and I have failed so many times. I have fallen on my face so many times. One of my other superpowers is making massive mistakes and failures, and then extracting enormous value from that. And so, Today I'm running a successful business as a result of falling, falling flat on my face 3 times. I've emptied out our retirement savings. I've done all sorts of things in pursuit of businesses. I've been fired twice. Um, what haven't I failed at in career? But you know what? It was all part of the process. And once you learn that failure is temporary and it's just an opportunity to find something better, you, but you have to fail in order to, like, you have to build failure tolerance. And the only way you build failure tolerance is by doing it. You have to practice.
Keep failing.
Keep failing.
And then the other opportunities, you're going to start to see them because you failed at this one thing, and you need to be open to going into the next thing.
And here's the beauty. Like, once you do this, once you figure this out, once you fail and you bounce back and you fail and you bounce back, what starts to happen is you start to lose your fear of failing. And that starts to build you start to develop a little bit of bulletproof in your subconscious. And this is where, like, if you're going to play the corporate game and you're going to get into the blood sport that is corporate politics and climb that corporate ladder, one of the best things that you can develop is to be free of fear of getting fired. I have been paid to go away twice in my career. It is the greatest thing. I highly recommend severance to anyone that ever can figure out how to pull it off. But when you lose your fear of being fired, like, you can do some really powerful, awesome things, and your performance will speak for itself. When you are not afraid of making a mistake or being judged for doing the right thing, for caring too much for your people, for taking a risk, for saying the thing out loud that everybody around the table is too scared to say, but everybody knows it needs to be said. When you can get to that space, then you can become a true gangster in the best form of the word, and you can start making things happen. And that's magic, right? That is magic, but you can't get there unless you land on your face a few times and then get up and dust off and be like, you know what? That really sucked, but I'm still here. I can dust off and I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to get back in the game and do it again.
For me, the key is to know it's not personal.
No, and it's not permanent.
That too.
It's temporary. You will bounce back. Human beings naturally, we're some of the most, we're resilient. We don't give ourselves credit for it, but we are the most resilient animals. It's incredible. And so you just don't be afraid to bounce. You bounce, and then you just use the momentum off the bounce when you fail and get on to the next thing. Keep going.
Yeah. Tell me about the object you brought and how it reflects your passion.
So the thing I brought today is it's just a little Native American hatchet. I bought it on a roadside stand in Arizona. And the reason I have this is that we use this as the talking piece in our family council meetings that we have once a month. And so this represents my passion for my family. Which I think that's the thing that, we started out this conversation about, the only thing I was pursuing in my life was really, I had 2 things I cared about in my early 20s. One was making that 100,000, and 2 was, chasing women. And so that's what I did the first half of my 20s. And, now, you talk about changing priorities. Now I realize that, everything and the only things that matter live in this house with me or are direct family members. And so that's where, when you're really clear about what matters and you're anchored in that, then everything also, career starts to take a very different kind of perspective, and it frees you up to, I think, pursue the things that make you more whole, which is why I do what I do, because it makes me a better person for my family.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you have family council meetings. How many families could have benefited from a monthly family council meeting?
We needed it. We added it a couple years. I think we've been doing it now a couple years, and it's the kids always roll their eyes every time it's time to do family council. but then afterwards they talk about how valuable it is, and it's like something they roll their eyes at, but they're glad we do.
Yeah. And yeah, you need that like talking stick to know, okay, this is my time to be heard.
Yep.
You're preparing them to be those future gangsters in the workplace, to
I'm
speak
trying.
up.
I'm
And
trying. I don't know that I'm doing very well, because um, their mom and I are both self-employed and have been for a long time. So their conception of what it means to work is sitting with a laptop on your couch, or like staring into Zoom, talking to people somewhere. Like dad runs around and said, "Hey, I need you to be quiet for the next hour because I'm recording a podcast interview." And they're like, "Oh yeah, just another day." So I don't think they're going to understand what it means to work in an office by the time they get
yeah.
there.
Well, I think also the concept of the office is very nebulous to
That's
anyone
true.
that's never been there. Once you're there, I
Yes.
think you can't get it until you're there. And I think that's also what creates all these like feelings that you're not qualified to get there. Because then once you are there, you're like, there are people here that are procrastinating and like missing deadlines and that are unreliable. And it's
Yes.
like,
Yes.
those skills that you have, like they're a big deal. Don't downplay them because once you get
Yes.
to the workplace, you'll see they're rare.
And
Um,
and the thing that you becomes the older you get, I was just talking with a friend of mine the other day, like, it's two old guys talking, about just as we get older, you start to realize how silly it was, because when you're young, you look around and you think everybody else has it figured out. Like you're looking and everybody else knows more than you, and they're really confident and they got all these things figured out. And the reality is everybody is faking it half the time. They're making it up. They don't really know. They're insecure.
totally.
The what they might have on you is the benefit of they've been around a little longer, so they know some things. And if you want to accelerate your career, like go talk to them and ask them questions to see if they'll share with you some of the things they've already learned. Like that's how it's the relationships and the connection with people that'll propel you forward. But that is the other thing I pile on to that is like, don't assume just because someone's older than you or in a higher position than you that they actually know what they're doing. Like I distinctly remember this in corporate early on when I got my first like corporate HR job. Is I became pretty clear early on that, like, while I was not an expert in the stuff that I was doing, I knew more than the other people in the room, which by default made me the expert. And so then the game became to make sure that they never figured out. So like they just assume I knew what I was doing. And so as long as I had good intent and I could figure it out on the fly, I was like, let's go big. Like this makes sense to me. If I can sell it to them, they're going to assume I know what I'm doing. We can do some cool stuff. And that's how my first several years, I was able to do some really awesome things. And because I kept pitching these big ideas and people assumed I knew what I was doing. And I was making most of it up as I was going, but it was based on some good hunches and some, general, like it wasn't like I was completely clueless, but that's the thing you realize is that's where like assume you're qualified until proven otherwise. That'd be a
Ooh,
good way to live by. Like just assume you're qualified. Somebody else will tell you if you're
yeah.
not. And half the time they will just never show up and tell you. Like
And that's
you're
okay
like,
if
how did
things
I
don't
get
work.
this job?
If you
Yeah.
pitch a big idea and they're on board, it's okay if it doesn't work. Things are not going to work. It's all about testing hypothesis. That's what, it's these projects that you started out in college, like, that that's the process. Not every project is going to be ultra successful. And every business knows that every project is not going to be ultra successful. So what advice do you have for emerging professionals today?
So I've hinted at this a couple of times is that the I think that the thing that if I look back to throughout my career and everything that I've accomplished of any significance, in every case, in every case, the reason or the path there, I can trace it back to a relationship with someone who gave me a piece of advice, opened a door, um, was supportive, was reminding me that I wasn't crazy, was telling me that I was qualified for that. Why not take that shot? It all like relationships, social capital. And that's where, ironically, like I said, that's what the first book that I wrote with my buddy Joe was called Social Gravity. And we wrote that book because we were out as young guys. We were super motivated, and we came together in one of these dysfunctional jobs, started a nonprofit because we wanted to make our community better. And we just started taking big shots. Like, we actually thought we could have a real impact on a city of 800,000 people. And so we started just like running around talking to people about big ideas. And it was amazing what we got done. And at some point, somebody started saying to us, "How do you guys know everybody?" And we were like, I don't think we do, but that's an interesting question. And so we started unpacking it. And that was sort of when we tapped into, or starting to realize, that our true ability to influence, our ability to get things done, both then and throughout my career, has always boiled down to the relationships that I have with people, the network that I've built, the trust that I've built with people. I've accomplished nothing individually, nothing. And nobody, and you will not either. Like, the myth of individual accomplish, it is a myth. We do not live in a world where you can be successful on your own. It just isn't a thing.
I think there's this conception that, like, you have to navigate career on your own. Like, you have to have this dream or this vision for yourself and then navigate it on your own. And it's like, yeah, have the dream, have the vision, but without the community, without the network, and without the mentorship, it's going to be a really tough journey. You're going to hit way more, bumps than you need to hit.
For sure.
And when you have that support, I completely agree with you.
We talk about it in the book as, well, I use the example of how, like, I grew up, my dad always watched these Western movies, these old, like, John Wayne Western movies. And so I remember growing up watching movies, and even the Western movies that come out today. The thing is, like, when the marshal goes out to head off the bad guys, to stop whatever terrible thing's about to happen in this movie, the marshal doesn't go out by himself or by herself. It's always by himself, because these old Westerns. But he doesn't go out by himself. He rounds up a posse, and he takes a posse with him, and he gets a posse of people with unique and individual skills that increase his likelihood of being successful. And that's what you have to do, is you have to build a posse. If you want to do truly great things and explode your career, then you need a posse. And so you got to start building it. You've got some of them there, but you need a big, noisy, powerful posse that's got your back when you go out to do these things. And that's my bit of advice. Build a posse.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jason. For everyone listening, go build your posse. Remember to take moonshots. And if something matters, write it down. That really stuck with me.
Golden rule of management.
Thank you so much, Jason. It was wonderful having you on the podcast. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. And that's a wrap. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and stay in touch. Book me to speak at your next event, or send your career questions to Amanda at findyourpassioncareer.com.